Now, hi, everybody, and thank you for coming along tonight for this monthly presentation by the New Zealand Society of Genealogists. So in this month, we're going to have a look at what people might have discovered, what's new out in the world of genealogy, because we have had some big events on. So I'm going to share my screen on. I knocked up a slideshow today. In the last month or so, we have had the 17th Australasian Congress on Genealogy and Heraldry in Brisbane, which I was fortunate enough to attend and had a great time. We also had Roots Tech, which was online and is still available online if you haven't managed to get in and see anything. And I think I came up with something from my branch meeting, but I can't remember what it was at this moment in time, but we'll get there. And something I ran across on the internet. So there's lots of places out there that you can find things. And I do believe we have a getting it right on how to sort of keep your ear to the ground and find out new things. So that's a good thing to go and have a look at. What are we going to look at? Well, a lot of the things that we're going to look at today are not necessarily new record sets, but they're going to be things like contextual information, such as social history, that when you're looking at your family, give a sort of wider view of what they were up to, and then may help you find more records on them because you think, oh, I could look here for them, which you hadn't thought of before. Of course, with Roots Tech coming out, there's been all sorts of new tools announced, as well as things that I've learned at the Congress. And there's some new additions to the NZSG website, so that's a little bit exciting as well. So we're going to start off with the Congress, and I'm not saying the full name because we don't want to be here all night. The keynote speaker, and so the first person to speak, was Judy Russell, who may be known to some of you as the legal genealogist. And she did a talk on convicts. Now, I'm pretty sure anybody that's got sort of that Australian and New Zealand family history will know that in 1776 there was the American War of Independence, which led to, in 1778, the first fleet arriving in Australia with convicts because they weren't allowed to send them to the Americas anymore. And Judy gave us sort of the beginning point looking at the convicts that went to the Americas. And it was quite interesting to sort of know that it was a really big commercial enterprise. You'd see advertisements in the newspapers saying that, you know, this company had got the contract to take this number of convicts over to America. When they got there, they were basically auctioned off. And conditions, well, you know, not always great. And the overarching thing that came out of it for me was that early colonial United States offers quite a lot to people who didn't really voluntarily want to be there. So we have those that were enslaved, those that were convicts, and another set of people that we possibly don't talk about as much here in New Zealand, and that's indentured servants. So if you have a family member that went, say, to America for 7 years and then came back again, it could be that they did some sort of indenture over there where they were a servant to somebody, and at the end of it they did get some sort of payment, which made them sort of more expensive than a convict, but they still didn't necessarily have the best time of it. Now, in Australia and New Zealand, we have had indentured servants, but they tend to have come from the Pacific, and the word blackbirding is usually associated with it, and it's possibly not far off slavery, to be honest. But there doesn't seem to be a tradition of indentured servants coming from Europe out here. Now, Jenny Joyce spoke on the reasons why people might have left Britain to come to New Zealand, and she kind of started off too with the people who had little choice in the matter. So, of course, convicts were a big one, especially to Australia. But she noted that along with the convicts came the military. And of course, if you're an average military private on a shilling a day, you're not necessarily going to get much choice when they say, right, get on the ship and go to Australia with these convicts. But the other group of people I hadn't thought of really was civil servants. And so while there was, a big military operation in Australia, it soon, became a civil operation as well because free settlers came. And here in New Zealand, we would have had a similar situation that people would have been sent out, possibly not with as much choice as they would have liked, to be civil servants to run our country for us. Now, in terms of the reasons why people came out, the Industrial Revolution does have a lot to answer for, and I will note, because it will come up again later, this is a beautifully artificial intelligently generated picture. I think it encapsulates it quite well, but it's still done by AI and off the internet. So the Industrial Revolution, of course, meant that there was industrialization or mechanization on the land. People lost their jobs there, moved into the cities, and ended up, basically in slums working in these giant factories. Of course, one other point she raised was peace, that after Napoleon was vanquished, so to speak, the number of standing army in Britain was reduced considerably, so a lot of men were now unemployed. There were a large number of years where there were bad harvests, and of course, bad harvests mean there are no food. And there were a lot of legislative things like the corn laws, which corn referring to all types of grain grown in Britain, keeping prices artificially high, making it difficult for the poorer members of society to eat. And then there was inflation caused by bad harvests and things like that. And added to that, we see the start of globalization. So for a while, we have cheap cotton coming in from America, which then becomes no cotton coming in from America, or cheap grain coming in from Russia, where they have all the serfs and, they're cheap. And that kind of cuts the bottom out of the market. And again, basically, all of these things lead to poverty. And with the poor laws that existed back in the day, in many parishes, it was cheaper to export somebody to Australia or New Zealand on one of these immigration schemes than it was to keep them in a workhouse or some other way support them within the parish. So quite a lot of factors going into it. At the end of it, it does seem to be money, making the rich richer and the poor poorer seems to be an overarching theme of it. Possibly a situation we're coming back into again, which is not good. One of the really big themes at the Congress was artificial intelligence. So I went to 3 different talks on this. Each had their own way, ways into looking at it, and some common threads came through on it, but I'm going to just highlight a few points that they made. So we had Hamish Maxwell Stewart, who is a professor of social history, and he pointed out that AI is a history thing. It uses historical data, and it uses information that we have put together, that we have collected and organized and put out onto the internet. That's how it's being trained in this day and age. The unfortunate side effect of that is rubbish in, rubbish out, and we've all seen this in our family history trees that other people have, which have some very dodgy information on them. He talked about AI sort of being an automation, that it can do things faster than we can. And that's the benefit from it, is that it can do this faster than we can. But he says that, there is a circle of improvement. If we improve the raw data, that will improve the AI. So going back to that complaint everybody has about all those trees out there, if we make sure our tree is the best tree it can be, it's the most accurate tree it can be, then when the tools start moving into becoming research assistants in the genealogy space, which they will be doing very soon and kind of already are, we will get better results because we are insisting that the information is good. Now, a project that Hamish has been very much involved with is the Unshackled, which is looking at convicts in Tasmania. And as you can see on the top of it, it says it's done in conjunction with the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery. So from pictures he had up, it looks like an amazing exhibition at the Tasmanian Museum, but they also have an online element where you can go and look at it. And one of the things they did in it was use AI-generated images to make the people come to life. Where did they get these images from? Well, they used a collection, a very diverse collection of sources. There were some original sketches. So there was an artist called Thomas Bock, whose specialty appeared to be taking pictures of people after they'd been executed. So yes, mugshots for when photography came into taking pictures of people who were convicts. Even one of the team who was a descendant of one of the convicts in the exhibition, they used him as a prototype for his ancestor. And in 1895, Hobart had an expo, and because photography was sort of a new big thing, they took lots of photographs of lots of the people who attended it, so they used those as well. However, he was very clear on pointing out there were a couple of problems. The first of which is AI makes people look too pretty. And it is because it doesn't appreciate that human faces aren't as symmetrical as it makes them. So it is, and you will see it, I've seen a number of pictures out on the web recently of people in, old-fashioned dress, and they really are very pretty. But we need to appreciate that people back in the day weren't as pretty as that. The second thing he noted is, will future generations know that these pictures are AI generated? And so it's very important as a genealogist, if you take a picture of your family member and you make it better in some way, there are plenty of tools out there that make them sharper. There are tools out there that can make them, turn their heads, and tools that can make them talk even. You really do need to be making notes in your things that these are AI generated, that these aren't the people who are actually flicking their hair or giving a talk to their family story. They are constructs using artificial intelligence, and I think that's a really important thing for us to note. A sort of aside, one of the things he talked about, which I found fascinating, was mapping cities using AI data, and in particular his work on Hobart. So in 1847, somebody whose name I didn't write down drew these block plans of every single block in Hobart and explained what was on each block. And so by linking the block to things like directories and valuations, and then through to birth, deaths, and marriage records, they were able to look at it and now, analyze what had happened on particular blocks or series of blocks at any point in time. And they even have weather data. And one of the things I think he was particularly interested in was infant mortality, so children that died before the age of 1, and looking at whether a weather event had seen a spike in infant mortality was something, having linked all these things together, they were able to do. So that sort of information, gives us so much more social context about what was happening in a particular place at a particular time. So I think that's a really exciting area of where AI can help us make all those links together. And the other thing he noted, going back to the convicts, is that if you're descended from a convict, you're descended from one of the lucky ones, because convict life was hard. There was disease, malnutrition, really hard work. People died a lot, and and were too unhealthy to have children. So if you are descended from a convict, you are descended from one of the lucky ones. Now, Ian James came and talked about AI. He works for Family Search, and he kind of delved into the different types of AI, which all got a bit complicated for me, but I think I've managed to understand a bit of what he was trying to say. First of all, so things like ChatGPT, which is one that we've all heard of, it's a language learning model. So it's going out there and finding similar language when you ask it a question, which is why it infamously cannot tell you how many R's there are in strawberry, although by now somebody might have printed it out there and it might have figured it out. Ian talked about the move towards agentic AI, which is where the AI is connected to a database and it consults that database to find your answer rather than, information that's being pulled in from the web. And as time goes on, it may consult the internet as another sort of database, I suppose, at its access. But he talked about it being done in groups of AIs, separate ones, and they could get the AIs to check each other so that what they were coming up with was not some of the hallucinations that they talk about these days, which to me is just lying, but they have to have a pretty word for it, and they've picked that one. So there are a lot of advances coming that will make AI hallucinate less and be more useful. Andrew Redfern, who is Australian, also did another talk on AI, and the key points I took from his one is use the one that's best for the task. There are a lot of different AIs out there. Some of them are really good at doing images, for example. I know our webmaster Jan has been using Copilot to come up with a few images that have turned up on Facebook. Others, like ChatGPT, may be better at text. And so you need to understand what the specialty is of the AI that you're using. And he had a whole screen full of little logos, probably at least 12 different AIs that are out there. And the other thing he said was keep experimenting with it. You know, pick one that you like, or it does the sorts of things that you want it to do, and just keep playing with it. Because as you play with it, you learn its foibles and how to make it better. And so, you know, you learn how to use it. And the skills that you learn by being good at one, you can then transfer over to the others. Everybody who spoke on AI said you will need to verify what you find. So if it's telling you something like it's a fact, you want to find the record that underlies what it's telling you. And, you know, I mean, to genealogists, this is kind of basic things, but if you're talking to your family, I think that's a really good point that you need to point out to them, that we need the facts that underlie this thing, not what the AI has spat out at us. And Nick Barrett, who is famous for Who Do You Think You Are, he gave the final keynote speech at the Congress, and he spoke for an hour, seemingly off the cuff. He, unlike me, who has lots of slides here to prompt myself, he just managed to talk for an hour, and I was so engrossed I didn't take very many notes on it. But one of the things he put that I did note down is that we need to be mindful of the challenges to the authenticity of the records that AI is doing. And that goes back to the whole thing of labeling things if they're AI generated, going to the original source of what the AI is telling us is this information. So I think there's a lot of things out there in the AI space that we need to be wary of, and we need to make sure that we've got our thinking caps on when we're dealing with it. Now, one of the little bonuses that has come out of it for NZSG members is I was having a chat to the people from the Genealogical Society of Victoria and said, you know, we swap our journals with other societies for the benefit of our members. And they said, that sounds good. And I said, email Julian. And lo and behold, today already, or on Thursday, the Congress finished on Sunday, we've already got that up and running, and we have a copy of the Ancestor Journal in our Overseas Family History Journal collection now. So like the New Zealand genealogist, the Australian societies don't necessarily only have articles on Australia. So you might find something interesting in there. So go and have a look. Now, you may be wondering, I haven't mentioned any of the New Zealand speakers. Well, Fiona Brooker and Maggie Gaffney both gave a talk that I attended, and Michelle Patient did a talk on ancestry, which unfortunately clashed with something else that I wanted to see, so I didn't see her. But they were all very well received, and I'm just going to put this out here. Wait for Family History Month, because I'm quite sure that we will have some of the great speakers that were at the Congress from New Zealand speaking at the Auckland Expo, or the Wellington Family History Day, or the Christchurch Expo. So there'll be one that's within, you know, apart from Di, who's in Queensland, 500 Ks of you, she says. This is a short day trip, isn't it? Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, Family History Month coming up in August, and there'll be lots more for people to see there. Roots Tech. Now, I have to say I have not delved into Roots Tech as much as I could. I have a long list of things to get through, and I haven't yet gotten through it. But I did pull out a few things. Some of the companies announced how many records they now have. So Ancestry reckons it's up to 60 billion. MyHeritage has gone up to 20. Find My Past and Family Search just are in the billions. I suspect Family Search may even be over 100 by now. They all have been busy collecting records, digitizing them and making them available. Ancestry have launched a new tool called Networks, which is a way in their family trees to pull people together. It's in beta testing and it's currently only available to Pro Tools subscribers. Now, I've had the briefest of plays in it, and I think it will be really cool once I have some more time to actually make good use of it. But if you have people that have come together, say through business rather than through marriage, it may be a way of pulling those records together so you've got them in one space to, explain the comings and goings of all of it. Again, it's only available to you if you have Pro Tools. And I'll just make a note here that Pro Tools just doesn't just cover DNA. There's quite a lot of tree tools in there as well. Family Search have had for a wee while, but I think they plugged it a bit at Roots Tech there. Family Search Labs and the full text search. I have been finding all sorts of amazing things in here, and I would really encourage you to go and have a look at it. Look, because apart from anything else, they've got the New Zealand probate files in there. What it does is that it's searching all of the text. So it's like searching in a newspaper, but it's searching documents for all the text that you've put in as your search criteria. So, for example, one I found, which was actually in the Victorian probate files, a man I believe to be my great-great-grandfather's brother had signed an affidavit saying that the widow of the deceased person whose will it was actually his widow. Now, he's never going to get indexed into the index. The widow is probably unlikely to get indexed into the index. Of course, the deceased person would, but you'd never find the file if you're looking for somebody who's completely unrelated. So it's an opportunity to go in and see if there are bequests from people that are unrelated or, you didn't know to look for. Mentions in it for property they might have owned. Quite sometimes in probate files, they say, I leave this bit of property currently in the possession or, rented by this person. And so you might find out all sorts of things. The Irish land deeds, oh my gosh, so much more. And so much more on top of all of that. So really a cool tool to be using. Now, from random other places this month, I think many of you already know about Luke Howson's tool, the Ancestor Search Helper, which is a really cool way of pulling together public records. So the records that sit in the public tier of the Kiwi collection now can be accessed through that. So if you're not an NZSG member, you can be prompted to realize that actually we hold a lot of records. And if you are a member, it might remind you that you need to go search on the Kiwi collection as well, because there are a lot more records available for members and for subscribers. So that's a really cool thing to have happened. I just thought I would add this one in because I think it's a really good example of a collaboration between Archives New Zealand and Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision. If you're into the symphony, so they've done an online exhibition on the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and it includes photographs and film and sound recordings and all sorts of things. So if you have interest in music and in the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, even from a personal just liking the music or because you have someone who was involved with it, go and have a look at their exhibition. I think if you go to the Archives website, it should be on there and fairly easy to find because the link name is rather long. Now, one of the big things that's in the news at the moment is the status of 23andMe, the DNA testing company. Now, I am taking guidance from our online DNA interest group. They did discuss this very briefly last night at their meeting. And the two key points they made is we can't make a decision for you about what to do with your DNA results if you have tested with 23andMe. But please go look for reliable sources of information. Most of the standard media is sensationalizing it and being all doom and gloom. And it really is a good idea to go and look at the people who are sort of in the know from a DNA genetic genealogy point of view. So some examples are Leah Larkin, who's the DNA geek, Roberta Estes, who's DNA Explained, and Judy Russell, once she gets back from the Congress, because of course she was with us in person in Brisbane, she will probably have something to say on the topic, having, examined the legal side of things and give you a more no-nonsense response than some of the articles that have been out in the media. That's the end of my presentation on this month, but I'm going to tell you about next month because somewhat surprisingly, even to me, we have a topic for next month, and that is we're going to look into the new Kiwi guides. So what are the Kiwi guides? Well, they complement the Kiwi collection, which is our records, and the Kiwi resources, which is a guide to national type databases. The Kiwi guides are your local databases or local repositories that hold information at a local level. So they are still a work in progress at the moment, but do go and have a look. They are only available to NZSG members, but they are lots of other places to go look for further information on your family. So that will be next month, and don't ask me what the date is, but it will be the last Thursday. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen when I find the right button. Yep, that one. And see if anybody else has found anything new and exciting that they'd like to share with me and the rest of everybody else here. Or if there are any questions.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yep.
You mentioned when you were talking about the Tasmanian Museum information about the convict, and convict descendants are lucky. I have a convict who the family story goes is that he was a convict and sent out in about 1833. He arrived in New Zealand in Otago before 1840, I think it was, or before 1848 anyway. And the family story goes that I said, well, you thought a convict's life was bad. Don't panic about that. It was a breeze compared to being on a whaling ship. Because he left Tasmania on a whaling ship and ended up in Otago. And one of my ancestors who arrived in Otago about 1840, he came from America on a whaling ship. So, times were very tough, but William Gary actually thought that it was an easier life being a convict than it was being on a whaling ship. So that's how bad the conditions were.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're like me and you get seasick, it would have been an absolutely awful life being on a whaling ship.
Oh, it was so dangerous. And, there were wooden ships. It was dangerous, very dangerous work. And they had a very small crew with the big animals. So it was really, really hard work for them. So, yeah, so that convict of mine actually said it was actually harder work being on a whaling ship than what it was being a convict.
That's very interesting. Right, Tricia.
I just have two things. Andrew Redfern's talk is also on Roots Tech, and I listened to it last week, and it was really good. I recognised the slide with all the different, things. And so, if you want to see it, I'd recommend it as well. And last night at the ODIG meeting, I didn't know that the DNA painter, you could put two centimorgan searches in. So if I'd missed that, other people might have missed it too. So that I've gone round and I've got a couple of cousins who are sisters, and you've got to have a sister brother. But I've been putting their centimorgan mounts into the engine, and it's popping up all sorts of different things. So yeah.
So to explain that a bit more fully, usually when you use the DNA painter shared centimorgan, you put one person's data in. But if you have two people that are the same generation within a family, so brother and sister works best, or siblings, I say, you can put two in, and especially if one's got a really high match and one's got a low match, you know, they're quite disparate, it will eliminate the relationships that can't, you know, that are too high or too low, and just give you the ones that both those values cover. And so Kathy's presentation, you know, talked about how she'd eliminated a number of possible relationships by using that tool. So yeah, so if you're an ODIC member, that presentation will be in the Google Classroom before too long. And
that was an awesome presentation.
That wasn't it? It was very good. Yeah,
a
lot of work had gone into it.
I was spellbound, and I was just watching
me too.
the whole way. And quite often I actually, you know, rewound a bit and that kind of thing during a presentation. But that one, I don't think I moved the whole time. It was just absolutely fascinating.
Oh, well, I'm sure Kathy will be pleased to hear that, because I will possibly see her on the weekend. So
well, give her out, tell her that she did a wonderful job.
I will pass it along. But has anybody else come across anybody? Has anybody actually had a chance to get in to look at Roots Tech, for example? Because the videos are there for a year. You don't need to have gone in over the weekend. It just meant you could be there live and ask questions, really. But there's a huge array, and you know, if you don't speak English, there's a huge array of presentations in other languages as well, and covering all sorts of interesting things. No, nobody been watching Roots Tech. Oh well, it's on your homework list.
It's on my to-do list.
Yeah,
it's on my to-do list too.
But now there's a legacy 24-hour webinar and
I know, yeah.
Oh, we're just spoiled.
We are possibly overwhelmed as well as overwhelmed with the choice.
It's amazing what COVID has done regarding Zoom and Microsoft Teams and that kind of thing. The 15th, 16th of March was also the Scottish Indexes Conference, which was about the 27th conference. Now, I've attended all of them. Some of them have only been for 1 or 2 presentations. But what is really great about it is that being down under, we can watch a few from the first session and then watch the end ones on the second session and go to bed in the middle. It's really, really good. And if you and they're
really good because they do put the schedule out in the different time zones, so you can see. You don't have to sit there doing any complicated mathematics about what on earth time it is on. You know, you just go in and you look for the New Zealand schedule and off you go. So yeah, they've got another one coming up, but I can't remember when it is.
September.
Okay.
Except when Australia is when the east coast of Australia is on daylight saving. So New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania are on daylight saving. Queensland's not, so they give it up in the New South Wales time zone, and then I've got to work out what time it is in HMK. So what's actually 5 o'clock down south is 4 o'clock for me. So I've got to make.
We did have this issue when we flew to Australia because we had our plane got cancelled and we ended up in Sydney instead of Brisbane, and Maggie Gaffney and I were going, because we've got our smart watches that are attached to our phones. We go, what's the actual time? Because we weren't sure whether they'd updated or not. That was interesting. Until I accosted somebody and went, what's the time? What do you think in this day and age? People don't usually ask.
The thing is, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania are always 2 hours behind you. When you're on daylight saving, Queensland is 3 hours behind.
Yeah. But there was a period of time where the changeover to daylight savings wasn't as synchronized.
No,
and so we'd have a week where we were ahead and they were still behind, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that, But anyway, people are getting better at putting the time zones in. And if you attend Roots Tech next year, it will give you the schedule in New Zealand time. So, you know, you can decide whether or not you want to attend something live at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whether you just want to wait till the next day and watch the recording. So
yeah, that on the Monday our time, they normally have it up on Facebook, and it's the second session that they actually have that up.
Yeah,
And
that's the Scottish indexes.
Yeah,
and you can go back, and although Facebook have changed their rules on live recordings, so they're only available for like 24 hours now.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you post a recording, it will stay there ad infinitum. But if you do, you know, a Facebook Live, it doesn't. So yeah, I suspect that there's a lot of storage space chewed up in Facebook with big video thing.
Absolutely.
Right. So has anybody got any questions? Would we like to have a quick look at the Family Search Labs thingy? Should I share a different screen? This is the page. So if you go just Family Search /Labs, you don't need to worry about the EN in the middle. You need to be logged in, and it will ask you to log in. And you scroll down. Now, I've discovered that there's 7 labs at the moment. They do move around on the screen, but usually you can tell which one it is because it's the one that says go to the experiment. So this is what the search page looks like once you've searched for something. And I've just chucked in on this search my 3 times great-grandfather, Jonathan Muckleston Key. And I've been very surprised, and I haven't had a chance to read these yet, but he's turned up in Irish deeds, which, given he was quite wealthy, is probably not that surprising. But yeah, and then it comes back into some English records. But he's got a very unusual name, so I know it's definitely him because I've never come across another one of his name. I did a search also for my great-great-grandfather and also my 3 times great-grandfather, because they both have the same name. I have junior and senior, William Webb Venn. Now, he was a notary public or a scrivener, and what I've been fascinated by is the different places his name turns up in on these deeds. So we're in LA, New York, Tennessee, Nova Scotia, California again, Inverness, Nova Scotia, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Missouri, Alabama. And I did find, as I have looked at this search before and just went, whoa, it even turns up in England with a marriage record, which might be useful. But it even turns up in like places like South America and things like that. So if you have somebody who had a job that was anything to do with documentation, you might be quite surprised at where they turn up on this full text search. But I have discovered you can put keywords in, so a location, if you have a name that is, you know, not uncommon, common, and you can. I haven't found that the date side of things and the places really, but once you've much use. But once you've done it, you can actually come up here and filter down by place. So, you know, I have one in the Caribbean. So William Webb Venn signed a document in Spanish for Costa Rica. Things. It does pay to remember what filters you've got on, because sometimes it doesn't necessarily show you, and you search again and you've got filters on that are not for where you're looking. But you can also filter by collection. So if we get rid of the location one. So if you're looking, say, for the Irish deeds, there is a quick way of getting into the Irish deeds. But you see, these are all the different collections. Now, the New Zealand probates are a number of different collections based on different courts. But I've managed to find, you know, quite a few people, and you can put New Zealand into the keywords. What I found fascinating by not putting any sort of location things in there is I was looking for a cousin, what I believe to be a cousin on the Irish side of the family. He turned up having a probate here in New Zealand because he obviously owned some sort of property and the public trust took care of it. So, you know, never underestimate where your ancestors are going to pop up using the full text search, but it is proving to be a lot of fun. And now I'm stopping sharing again. So we are fast approaching 8 o'clock. Is there anything else anybody would like to share or talk about? Or wrap it up for the night? Nope. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming along. And if you want to watch this again, it will be on the website at some point, probably late next week, because this weekend life's getting rather busy. But we're planning Family History Month, so that's exciting. And we're also going to hopefully make it to the Irish Day here in Wellington, which is also going to be exciting. So lots of things on all over the place. Okay, well, thank you all. I hope to see you all next month. We're going to talk about the Kiwi Guides. And
Thank you.
Hopefully I'm going to have some guest speakers. That's my job for the next month, is to hit up some people to come and talk to you about whatever it is that they are involved with at a local level.
Excellent.
We'll see you then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.